Are you ready? Are you ready? Happy Mushoku Mondays, everybody. We are on Volume 6, Chapter 13, Interlude and Extra Chapter. I am now completed with Volume 6. I am now officially, honestly, with technically a little bit into this remaining of this volume. We're technically going beyond the first season, but yes, I'm officially beyond the first season of Mushoku Tensei Jobless Reincarnation, and holy crap, these last 3 chapters were absolutely insane. But before I get into all that stuff, yes, welcome everybody, Mushoku Mondays. Hope you're all doing well. Thank you once again for all of your guys' support, everybody that watches, likes, comments, subscribes, memberships, Patreons, tips, all that jazz, and yes, those that go into the premiere for each of these releases. Love hearing from you guys. It's been a lot of fun. And yes, as per usual, no spoilers and comments, chats, or anything. Everything is purely speculation, yada, yada, yada. But yes, back to this. I'm done. And 13, Interlude, and Extra Chapter were pretty much, yes, covered by the anime, except for technically the whole thing with the Extra Chapter. But holy crap, it's all different. This is... We've had things that aren't covered. We have things that aren't adapted. We have things that are changed slightly, but never a case where it just almost feels as if they're changing things for a purpose, or at least not including certain characters in certain situations and stuff. So the lack of introductions and stuff makes me really question what exactly the focus is going forward. Not that they're going to completely change the story. I'm not going that route, but yes, these are crazy chapters. And yes, of course, the biggest exciting thing, at least for some folks, Adrian, is yes, that we finally, for the first time ever, get a first-person perspective of Eris. Yes, which is going to be really fantastic, but I'm going to put my usual warnings out there that, yes, some of this stuff could technically be covered in the second season. I don't see it likely. I think they're just really kind of trimming some of this fat in order to keep the story going forward. As I've said before, I really do think that this entire anime adaptation is more Rudeus-centric. That's why they're probably skimming certain things off, but still trying to get enough to make the story make sense. So keep that in mind. We are going to get into some stuff that is really interesting, and I cannot wait to dive into it. So let's jump into Chapter 13. I'm going to try to get through all 3 of these chapters. You'll know based on the title, so I don't know why I say that every time. It is technically 2 of the biggest chapters in this volume and 1 really short one. So hopefully I can get through everything in 1 video and it's not 5 hours long. But yes, opening up chapter 13 of volume 6, we of course have Rudeus at the refugee camp. And he's at the point now where he has no motivation to really kind of tidy things up. Not his luggage or anything, he just kind of flops right on the mattress. He notes that, yeah, this isn't physical exhaustion. He's kind of wondering, is this what people call mental exhaustion? Like, this is the first time he's ever had so much mental exhaustion in his life that it's really worn him down. He acknowledges that, yes, he's technically just received a really huge shock with everything that happened with Eris. Saros, Philip, Hilda. I mean, while he wasn't, like, particularly close to them, he can still remember them. He remembered the long ride with Saros while they inspected crops and talking about Eris. Philip's awful smile when he proposed to him to pretty much take over the household together. And yes, technically Hilda begging him to marry her daughter and join the family. They were all gone now. The hallways, the ballroom that they danced in, the library full of knowledge, the voices echoing in the hallway, all that stuff was gone. Not just the manor, but also his own village was gone. Now, he hasn't seen the village himself, obviously, but he remembers the trees in the garden that Zenith was taking care of. The trees that Roxy struck while she was teaching him the Saint Tier water magic. And that large tree that Sylphie and him played under. They're all gone. Now, he catches himself thinking about this, like, why is he only remembering about the trees of Buena Village? Whatever, it was gone. Paul already told him. But this whole shock was bigger than he thought. Now, I did kind of wonder about this whole thing. Why specifically trees? It seems like it's a little bit too obvious to point this out. My only real speculation I can really give here is that trees are always like pinnacle parts of his life, seemingly in this new world. I mean, every single time that something big happens in his life, there's a tree nearby. Yes, when Roxy first showed up and was teaching him how to use magic, she broke Zenith's tree. Later on, when he basically graduated from being taught by Roxy, this big pinnacle point in his life, it was this tree where, yeah, Roxy struck it. And then, yes, technically, hanging out with Sylphie and teaching her, it was always under this tree. Trees are always like pinnacle points in his life when he was growing up. So it makes sense that those are the things that always jump up in his mind. And that's when a banging came at the door. It was Eris. She comes in. Evening, Rudeus. Eris, are you all right now? I'm fine. Rudius was truly shocked by her strength. Coming in all normal with her normal pose in front of him, she was stronger than him. But he did notice something was different. She knocked. She didn't kick open the door. She says, well, I figured it was how things were going to end up. Really? She spoke as if nothing was bothering her. Like she was prepared for their deaths. Rudius couldn't do that, even with Zenith missing, but it was likely that she was dead. At this point, Rudius asked her what her plans were, specifically what Alphonse said. But of course, she expressed that she didn't care about all that stuff. She was looking straight at Rudius. He then realized that her outfit was different. It was a black one piece that she hadn't worn since she bought it in Milshin. Yes, the outfit that she bought way back here that kind of surprised her that she bought. He could see her chest pushing through the thin material. She wasn't wearing a bra. He also noticed that her hair was damp and she smelled like soap and sweet perfume. Eris says, Rudius, I'm alone now. And besides that, I recently turned 15. Rudius panics. Sorry for not remembering. He was honestly surprised because if she had reached 15, he assumes that she would make a fuss about it, but he never seen her make a fuss, so he didn't know what day it was. You may not have realized it, but it was the day that Rijerd told me that I was an adult. Should I have gotten something for you? Is there anything you want? Yes. I want one thing. A family. Rudius thought to himself, sadly, that's not something I can give her. I can't bring the dead back to life. Rudius, become my family. Rudius was confused, but despite the fact they were in a dark room, he could see Eris's face was bright red. Was this a proposal, he thought? You mean like brother and sister? I don't care what you want to call it. So basically what I'm saying is, let's sleep together. This is so dumb. Rudius seriously didn't know what she meant by this. I like how brutally honest he is in his own mind. Like, I have no idea what she's talking about. And she's literally here going, let's do it. He didn't know what she meant by the words, but he assumed that she was in shock by everything that she just faced. She wanted to mend her heart. So perhaps he just wanted to pretend to be family? Rudius says, I'm feeling kind of lonely today, so I might end up doing something really perverted to you. He was being honest. He had no confidence in himself to hold back if they went into bed together. Again, he's just assuming that she just wants to lay in bed together and he's afraid that he's going to do something to her. She even knew that he couldn't hold himself back, but yet she still said this. Edda says, you can do it today. I already told you before, I'm not going to do just a little bit if I do. I remember, and I'm saying that you can have your way with me. Why are you suddenly saying all this? I promised you we would do it when I turned 15, right? That was when I turned 15. I don't mind either way. I do mind. Rudius, being confused by her actions, once again decides to go back to his old world in his mind and think about these old stupid eroge games. Remembering the people in these games and how self-destructive they are when they feel desolate. They were coping with loss with someone else. With that said, what would that say about him if he took advantage of the situation? Taking advantage of her when she's weak. Of course, yes. Let's be honest, a part of him wanted to just jump right in, throw away his virginity. But with them both broken and in pain, they would surely regret it. He thought that, yes, I might not get another chance at this, of her giving me permission. Especially if she decided to go with Paimon. They'd never get to fulfill their promise. What's worse is he didn't want somebody else to get Eris' first time. And yes, thinking about those protagonists in those old games, he thought about how he used to always get so angry and put down all these stupid protagonists that were indecisive. And yet, here he was, hesitating over the same thing. Yes, he figures he can wait 2 more years and she'd probably show up out of nowhere, presenting herself and wrapped in ribbons with her arms tied behind her back, saying that I tied my arms up so that I wouldn't punch you. But then again, he could die again. At this point, Eris yells out, "Jeez." She cleared her throat and sat down on Rudius' lap. She sat kind of sideways so that she can wrap her arm around his neck and, expose her chest and her beautiful face to him. Then she noticed something pressing up against her thigh. So wrong. What the heck is that? It's because you're so cute. She hummed and then gave him a little bit of service with her thigh. This is getting a little bit more graphic than the anime. This means you're turned on, right? Yes. So you don't dislike me, right? Nope. Are you worried about my father and grandfather? Yeah. Rudius, you've been giving me a naughty look this entire time. Yeah. But you're still gonna refuse me? Yeah. Make no mistake, Eris had him nearly tamed. A dog wagging his tail. But he summoned up one last sense of reasoning. A promise is a promise, isn't it? We said when I turned 15. That's when she said, Hey Rudius, my mother taught me this, but since it's embarrassing and I'm forbidden from using it anymore, I'm only gonna say it once. She took in a deep breath. She brought her face close to his ear. Then came a few words in a tone so soft it was as if a forbidden seal was undone. Rudius, I want to be your little kitten. Meow. Wasn't like I want to have your kittens mew or something, meow or something like that in the anime. Same effect. Same effect. With those words went straight into his ears, infiltrated his simpleton brain, snuffing out any last thread of reasoning, keeping him from giving in. In response, he became a beast and shoved her down in bed. That night, they both ascended into adulthood. Rudius had forgotten all complicated matters that weighed him down. All he could think about was wanting to be with Eris. He didn't say anything, but he thinks that he loved her. He wanted to protect her forever, not caring about any of the circumstances. Paul said it himself, who cares about noble duties? He would do anything to help Eris. He thought they could make 3 children, maybe even more. Rudius was elated, and it never crossed his mind what Eris might be thinking. Which is a great segue into the next part. I like this. Again, it's kind of that emphasis that I kind of mentioned this when the anime adapted. Obviously, that was a very controversial scene because of Eris' age and the fact that Rudius has the mind of a 40-something-year-old at this point. It was a difficult one to really kind of justify because obviously that whole age difference there. But it was kind of nice in the anime that it sort of portrayed all these shots at that same moment of everything they've gone through together. The moment that he first met her, the ballroom dance, being transported, being afraid, the whole thing with Paul, her embracing him, everything they've done up to that point, that long 3-year span they were spending time together, it kind of made it more romantic, if anything. But yes, like here it's literally, he keeps pushing back. He's saying, no, I can't do this. I can't do this. I can't take advantage. And it's funny because it's not trying to be like he's justifying it. And it's not like he's trying to talk about how if he did it, it would be immoral because of his age. Again, Rudius in this world, nobody knows. Why would he be thinking about that? He doesn't care about that. All he really cares about in his own mind is not what we're seeing and judging him for. What he's seeing is that it would be wrong and we'd be making a mistake because we're both broken right now. We're both in pain. And doing this, we would have regrets. But then she keeps pushing. She keeps pushing. And I also like the fact that the entire beginning part, he doesn't even have any clue what she wants. Like, he doesn't even know if she wants what she's asking for. But yes, we know exactly what she knows what she's asking for. Because, yes, like I said, most of this chapter, what makes it so great and everybody's been excited about is that we get a full glimpse of what Eris has thought of Rudius pretty much this whole time. And it's truly, truly fascinating in ways that I really wasn't expecting. But yes, this segment opens up by Eris essentially introducing herself. I am Eris Boyus Greyrat. That day, I became an adult. The present that I wanted for my 15th birthday was from Rudius. She loved Rudius. This is something that she realized on her 10th birthday. It was that night that her mother woke her up, put her in a red nightgown, gave her a serious look, and then told her, go to Rudius's bed and give yourself to him. At that time, Eris wasn't against it. Her mother and Edna already explained what boys and girls do together before to kind of ensure that she knew what she needed to do when that day happened. She just figured it would be somewhere further in the future. And despite her trepidation, Rudius touched her body. Rudius and her father were talking late that night, so he was perhaps told about this. But something popped in her head at this time. Maybe he doesn't actually love me. Maybe he was doing this because my father told him to. Yes, even back then, to Eris, Rudius was an amazing person. He knew everything and can do everything. Yet he kept learning and moving forward. She was sure that he suited her well. But as his breathing grew ragged, she didn't get any sense that he cared for her feelings. She was an award given to him by her father. Realizing that, she pushed him away. She ran out of the room, but before she got to her room, she stopped. At that point, she realized that she may have done something that she couldn't take back. Wasting her last chance, as mother told her that no one else but Rudius would take her. She knew this was right because everybody else that she met from other families didn't want her. None had the grit that Rudius had. Rudius obviously had an interest in her body, touching her and looking at her, but no matter how many times she punched him, he kept doing it. This was different than all the kids from her school that she punched. They just they left her alone after that. She felt like if she lost Rudius, she would spend the rest of her life alone. She thought, who cares if I'm in a reward? At least we can be together. With that, she returned to the room. Rudius there obviously kneeling on the ground and begging for forgiveness, sprawling out like a frog. At that point, she decided to make a promise. 5 years. At that time, she figured that would be enough. Rudius was an old enough adult to wait for her. But that was when she started to fall in love with him. Side note before we continue on, because we're going to get to the displacement incident and everything, I think this segment is really fascinating. Because again, it really does paint the picture that, yes, she did like him. She thought that he was amazing. We kind of got that sense from Rudius' perspective when she asked him in the bar and was like, Why are you so smart? Why are you so good at everything? You don't struggle with anything. You're amazing. You're perfect at everything. He's like, no, I'm not. He has to keep pushing. She knows that he's always trying to learn. He's always pushing himself, despite the fact that, why would he need to? He's so perfect. But then again, this is like the terrible thing. We obviously see that Hilda pushed her as well. There was a sense that I think from Rudius' perspective that she was there because she thought that he was lonely. But no, that wasn't the case. Her mother sent her. Her mother was so afraid that Rudius was her last chance. You need to go with Rudius. Rudius is amazing. He's a good kid. He does all this great stuff. And again, he's patient with her. Hilda thought, and it's really terrible if you think about it, but again, it's just kind of the setting itself. This isn't something they view as being wrong. She thought, this was my daughter's last chance. I have to get her moving. I need to push her onto Rudius. Go to him, give him everything. She wanted to lock this boy in. But even still, she pushes away. And it's so sad that she stops in her tracks. Again, another thing that we never knew exactly why she turned around. Why did she stop and come back and accept his apology? She thought, I screwed something up and I'm done for if I don't go back now. And it gets even more crazier getting in the next segment with the whole displacement. She thought she made a mistake. And I don't know that I can walk away from this boy because, again, unlike everybody else that's around me, he's the only one that would stop. He's the only one that would keep going. He's the only one that would keep pursuing me. But again, she never thought that he liked her. She just thought to herself, well, I'm just a reward for Rudius. Dad's giving me away to him. But everything changed, of course, when Eris and Rudius were transported during the displacement. They woke up, there was a bird standing there, and she thought she was being punished for everything she just did, for doing everything that she pleased. Whenever she did something selfish, her mother would say that a Superd is going to come eat her. And now she thought, I'm now being punished for not letting Rudius have his way with her. She cried out and cowered, but grandfather, Ghislaine, none of them showed up. It was Rudius. Despite him being younger, he had the courage to calm and soothe her. She fell in love all over again. Even though his face was turning pale, he dealt with the demon folk. He didn't eat much, he hit the fact that he wasn't feeling well physically, and she knew he was doing it so that she would never feel uneasy, to keep her from worrying. For that reason, she decided that she was going to restrain herself too. She just held back in all those bad situations and let Rudius handle it. This is so funny because, again, from Rudius' perspective, he was just going, she's getting better. She's growing up. She stopped lashing out. She's doing good. No, it was all because she wanted to not have to have him worry. And it gets even worse as it goes along here, honestly. She said sometimes her anxiety would boil up, though. It would get to the point where she couldn't stop. But even still, Rudius wouldn't get angry. He'd just stay at her side. No cutting remarks, just stroking her head. He'd wrap his arms around her shoulder and comfort her. But he would never cross the boundaries. Even though he was normally playful about being turned on by her, he always held back. She figured maybe he was just trying to ease her anxiety, thinking about her, not himself. Girl, if you'd only known what was going through Rudius' mind every time this happens. But yes, technically, she's right. He held himself back. For this reason, she wanted to be stronger. She wanted to at least not be a burden on him. Yet she couldn't compare to their other companion, Rajerd. Well, even Rudius himself. If he used magic, she couldn't beat him. Yet despite that, Rudius let her gain experience fighting. She was sure that Rudius and Rajerd could easily handle everything alone. The thought of it made her cry. She thought to herself that he would come to hate her if he realized that she was holding them back. Worrying that he would just leave her behind, she tried desperately to get stronger, even asking Rajerd to train her. He constantly knocked her down, asking, do you understand? Every time she would nod, remembering Ghislaine's words. When training with someone stronger, always observe. And Rajerd was strong, even stronger than Ghislaine most likely. She watched him, mimicked him. Even while Rudius was sleeping, she would constantly ask Rajerd to train her. And thankfully he did it without a fuss. And she even figured it was difficult for Rajerd because obviously he cared for children. But yet she was confident in calling him master. Again, this whole segment is just breaking me. It's actually breaking me. Because again, from Rudius' perspective, I gotta get her home. I gotta get her home. I need to. This is my duty. I need to get her home. And yes, he never really kind of questions it. He's just always like, I need to get her home. And thankfully, she never did a lot of stuff that really frustrated him. That was for a reason. Again, she was trying her hardest not to be a burden on him. The moment they were displaced, she was a fish out of water. She was afraid. She was scared of being left behind by Rudius. And so she was constantly trying everything she can to make sure I don't look like a burden. I know they can handle this all themselves, and he'd probably just leave me, but I need to do whatever I can to make sure he doesn't leave me behind. It breaks my heart how hard she was trying. That's why she was... It kind of gives us, again, it kind of makes us believe that the only reason that Eris is training with Reserve is because she wants to get stronger, because it's fun, and she wants to be super cool and kill everything. No. She was afraid of being left behind. Going into a year in our journey, Eris thought that she was getting stronger. Ghislaine had told her rationality over and over. Through training with Reserve, she finally understood that word. Before, if she had sloppy movement, she didn't think anything of it. But now she realized that every single movement had meaning. And then she finally defeated Reserve. Now, she assumes that he got distracted. Roxy. But she took it. She took the win. She felt like she was finally not a hindrance anymore. She could finally walk alongside Rudius. And we all know what happens after this. And again, breaks my heart now knowing this. But then Rudius showed up after receiving a demon eye and deflated her swollen head, quickly beating her in a physical sparring match without magic. It was cheating. It was foul play. In a single move, he overtook her on a road that she'd been traveling for years, making her as much of a hindrance as she ever was. She cried in secrecy. The next day, she sobbed while swinging her sword on the beach. Then Reserve told her not to worry, that it was just because he was super compatible with this eye. If she trained, she'd get stronger. She had talent. She should never give up. Thank you, Reserve. Thank you, Reserve. But even still, him saying this, she felt like both Reserve and Ghislaine had been lying to her. Rudius looked grand to her, brighter than she could ever look at. She had to catch up, but she had given up at some point. However, all of this changed the moment they reached the Millis continent. When she met Gaius, she learned there's other techniques besides sword fighting and magic. But, unfortunately, he refused to teach her. She couldn't understand why. Then she went to Milshan and she fought assassins and completely overwhelmed them. I'd argue, and almost dying, but that aside. At this point, she's seen her own talent and strength. She had grown at some point. I kind of made a note here that through all this reading, what I'm quickly realizing is that Eris is always comparing herself to Rudius. Which, yes, technically with every character in the series, it seems like whenever we get into their minds, they at some point talk about comparing themselves to Rudius. And they shouldn't be. In a sense, you believe reading it, you really shouldn't be, because he's very different. But yes, she didn't realize that she had grown because she's always measuring herself to him. So she's constantly trying to reach this goal of this impossible thing that she's creating. And I think she mentions this at the end of this chapter, or at least this segment. She's always looking at him as being this impossible meter. He's up here, I'm down here. He's always up here and I'm down here. I gotta keep catching up. He's gonna leave me behind. And the moment that he's not in the picture, just the goblin slaying segment, wow, I'm really strong. You've always been strong. You've always been strong. It's why Reserve acknowledges you. But yes, after all that, she, of course, returned to the inn, and that's when we found out about the whole situation with Rudius having a spout with Paul, and this infuriated her. She realized he wasn't crying, but yet she's seen the extent of his depression. At this point, she finally remembered, he's 2 years younger than me. Despite his age, he had become a tutor of a selfish girl. He had to celebrate his 10th birthday away from his family. He was forced to travel the demon continent shouldering a burden like her. Then on top of all that, his father pushed him away. She couldn't forgive it. As an Asuran noble, she promised herself that she'd make Paul Greyrat pay, that she would cut him down. Again, this gives a little more context to that whole situation, because yes, we understand that why she would be mad at Paul. He did this to somebody that we knew Eris liked Rudius, and Paul did something terrible to this thing that she appreciated. But now it's more context in the idea that she's realizing all the stuff that Rudius has been going through, and then that. So it kind of adds all that stuff with it. Now, she had heard that Paul was a genius swordsman. He was an advanced tier sword god style, water god style, and north god style. And also, he was Rudius's father. I like how she adds that part. Like, Rudius is this genius, and so obviously, Paul must be like somebody that can spawn geniuses, so maybe there's another thing to that. Still, she had no doubt she could win using everything that Reserve and Ghislaine taught her. But Reserve stopped her. And yes, Reserve mentioned the idea that this was a spout between father and son. Knowing what Reserve had gone through with his son, she's like, I'm gonna listen to him. It never explained why she got the black eye, but still, I was a little bummed that we didn't get to an explanation what happened with the black eye. I figured this would be in here. In the end, yes, Paul and Rudius made up, but Eris couldn't accept it. She couldn't understand why Rudius would forgive him. She could never forgive someone like that. Rudius didn't talk much about it. Reserve didn't tell her anything, so they were both adults. Now, on the Central Continent, Rudius started eating more. Perhaps he had regained his spirit. As usual, he was incredible, befriending the third prince and saving his own family. Eris realized all that she and Reserve did was just go around rampaging without a forethought. Even though her intention was to save Rudius, she figured he probably could have saved himself. Even though, yes, Rudius told them that, he didn't do anything and that they helped him a lot, she didn't believe it. And then that's when Eris started talking about this moment that Rudius got even more amazing. The moment they encountered Orsted the Dragon God. Both her and Reserve were unable to move in the face of the embodiment of fear that was before them. But Rudius wasn't affected. How amazing he is. Then after Orsted easily defeated her and Reserve, Rudius was able to land an attack on him. She couldn't even see it. She couldn't even follow the attack that he unleashed to him. When Rudius got serious, he was amazing. He had fought back against a man that was regarded as the strongest in the world, the Dragon God. But then, as she thought that, he was fatally injured and was dying. Before then, she thought death was irrelevant to them. He couldn't die, and he was protecting her. They also had Reserve. They were safe, but she was mistaken. If it weren't for that girl's whims and the Dragon God being able to heal him, Rudius would be gone. She was scared. It renewed her fears of being a burden. Again, another really interesting, different perspective of this whole situation. That even though Rudius was just kind of acting without his own mind even registering a lot what was happening, and the fact that he screwed up that whole situation, and the fact that, yes, a lot of that stuff was on a whim, he was still amazing to her. Like, everything he did right there was so cool. He's so amazing. He's so powerful. And it gets even worse, because following this whole situation, Eris believed that Rudius became godlike. Despite almost being killed, he was nonchalant about it. After dying 3 days before, he was practicing new magic to prepare for another encounter. That's how she's seen him sitting there practicing to spell magic. Again, she said in that point, why are you so, how are you so amazing? Why are you so strong? She couldn't comprehend it. So she was scared, and she wanted to stay beside him. If not, he may disappear and leave her behind. Even at the point that they're almost home, and she's holding on to him, or at least technically sitting next to him and leaning into him, she was afraid he's gonna leave her behind once again. It's funny to think about the fact that as this whole volume ends, she leaves him, but still. Then it comes to the point that Reserve parted ways with them. Now here's the interesting thing, because I completely miscalled this. Remember when Reserve was going to leave, he told Eris, you took a blow from a guy that calls himself a god. You know what that means, right? And then she says, yes, I understand. I thought that was really kind of him saying, hey, look, you lived fighting a god. That's pretty dang cool. That's a great experience. And you were able to overcome it. But no, it seemed like it's a little different in Eris's mind. But yes, when Reserve parted ways, he said beating the dragon god was impossible. But he taught her something. He reminded her of the technique the dragon god used, which I shouldn't say here, but it was secret technique flow. It was burned in her head. The way that he deflected her attack, there was a method behind it. Orsted wasn't an unknown monster. He was a master, but he was using techniques known to man. Basically insinuating that there's something that she can learn from this ability, the secret technique flow. She can learn it. And technically, to the credit of what Rudius said before, Rudius said that he's seen this technique before. His father used it, but his father wasn't as refined. Like, the way that Orsted used it was smooth. And so now, Eris, having this burn in her head, she knows exactly how to use it. Or at least she has it in her head that she can envision it so she can use it. Or at least train it. And train it in a way that, again, is perfected. At this point, we cut to the point in which they arrived home. She was heartbroken. She had nothing. Ghislaine and Alphonse were there, but to her, they felt distant and formal. Obviously being her vassals, her servants. They were like different people to her. All she had left was Rudius, and she wanted the two of them to be family. She was impatient, and she thought she'd lose him. He had long finished his contract that he made with their family to train her, and now they had returned home safely. He was going to leave her behind. So she decided to use her body to keep him there. Though he hesitated, she was worried he wouldn't accept her. Here's the funny part. Despite being interested in her underwear, he never peeked in on her as she was bathing. Sure. Even on the ship travel to Millis, he could have touched her, but he didn't. Technically true. She thought maybe he wasn't interested in her body. She lacked femininity that most other girls had because of her training. Though that wasn't the case. He was actually turned on, and she was turned on by him being like that. They connected, and she realized partway when he grew weak and feeble, like he could break. That's where it's kind of getting a little bit crazy here. She realized once again he was smaller than she was. Yes, she notes that he was robust down there. He was smaller than she was. But he was shorter and more slightly built. He was so young, and yet he was always protecting her. Randomly, she thought about the whole situation with them traveling on the ship and him healing her. What if he wasn't exhausted from healing me that night? He would have been able to beat Gaius. Compared to him, what was she? She got more powerful. She got decent at swordplay, but she was so caught up in her image of Rudius' magnificent that she ignored how little he was. In the end, she used her anxieties of losing her family to force herself on him and treated him poorly in pursuit of her own desires. Again, she loved Rudius, but she was not fit to be with him. She would only be a burden on him. They could become family, but couldn't become more than that. Not husband and wife. As he said, brother and sister. They just weren't well balanced. She'd keep holding him back. So she decided that she would spend time apart. If she was with him, she would take advantage of his kindness. And that feeling of that night would linger in her. She would ache for it. A characteristic of the Grey Rat family, by the way. Although Rudius might not share it as strongly. Eris had no desire to do what Alphonse said, marrying another man. It was too late for him to ask her to live like the daughter of a noble family. Again, this is from the perspective of someone that's constantly been told that she will never head the family. She will never be special. They wanted to ship her off to be an adventurer. Besides, everything was gone in that region anyways. What's the point? There's no reason to sacrifice herself for a bunch of this region's citizens that she didn't even know. Instead, she would discard the Boreas family's name. Although she would remain the granddaughter of Saros and the daughter of her parents, living on with an iron will. She decided to part ways and keep training, non-stop until she could stand at Rudius' side. She would seek power. Since she trusted the words of Ghislaine, Regerd, and Gaius, she believed she had talent. So she would take Ghislaine's recommendation and go to the Sword Sanctum to train. She would meet Rudius again. Then they would take the next step in their family, becoming husband and wife, having kids, and living happily ever after. Knowing that he would probably talk her out of it, she decided that she didn't want to see him before she left. Instead, she decided to leave a note, but a very short one so that he couldn't figure things out. And then she left. And that's it. That's all. It's just so good. This is so good. Again, so much perspective of Eris that we never got in the anime. Again, technically in the anime, the moment that she does leave, you get this little brief moment, her talking about what she thought of him and everything like that, which, yes, kind of hits a little bit in this, but dang, for Pete's sake. Like I said, most of the beginning segment is her understanding her parents and what her parents were doing and pushing her over to her, and the fact that she would never have anybody else beside Rudius. Rudius was so patient. He was amazing. He's technically perfect for her. She understood that. But again, she was afraid that Rudius didn't love her, so she pushed back a little bit. And then as it went along, she realized over and over and over again how amazing he is. Him standing before Regerd, something that a Superb that she believed was there to kill her for doing these wrong things, stood before them, always stepped forward, and she constantly did not want to be a burden to him, constantly fighting back her own urges, shaping herself up, becoming better. And yes, we see all this stuff from Maria's perspective. We just don't know why she's doing it. We just figure, okay, she's actually listening to what he's saying. Good deal. No, she wasn't just maturing. She was forcing herself to mature. She was forcing herself so hard to get stronger and get better because not that she was in love with, again, she was in love with him, but she wasn't doing it because she was in love with Rudius. She was doing it because she was afraid he'd leave her. He was afraid he'd leave her behind, that she was a burden. She didn't want to be that. Completely flips my perspective on what she was doing and why she was doing it. It still gets to the same point, again, that she did love him, again, because she looked up to him. She glorified him so much, created an image of him that was this glorious thing. And yes, that's where it kind of, I guess, shapens up a little bit when we get the moment that she talks about after they slept together. She realized, once again, just like when she back with Paul, realized this he's smaller than me. It almost gives me a sense that she's kind of pointing out the fact that he's physically weak because she's a burden on him. Almost like he's frail, he's small. She is talking about the idea that, yes, technically he's still younger than her, but is pointing out the fact that she's holding him back. Like, he could be better. I'm a burden on him to the point that I am holding him back. And I need to get stronger so I can stand back beside him. Rather than always holding him back or constantly, pushing him back, I need to get stronger. We're not balanced. I think they said it in the note. We're not balanced. We're not a well-balanced group. So good. So good. And yes, it was a little bit more graphical in this portrayal of the whole thing, so I kind of did adjust it a little bit. Honestly, I didn't want to repeat a lot of the stuff that was kind of said in that chapter, but she pushed him, and she pushed him. And it is interesting to note, again, from the perspective of the viewers and the anime and the controversies around that stuff, it really does solidify in her perspective, I did something wrong. I forced myself on him. Using all my anxieties and fears of being left alone and all that kind of stuff, that's why she did it. It wasn't so much, yes, she did talk about the fact of the anxieties and the difficulties that both of them were facing, but it was more of a fact that she didn't have anything left and she didn't want to lose the last thing that she had. So in a sense, from Rudy's perspective, he thought that it would be a mistake between the two of them. It's not really a mistake from her perspective. She had one last thing. It wasn't that she was creating something through a mistake. She had one last thing and she needed to shackle it down. That was her point. That was what she was after. But again, after she did it, that's when she realized, I shouldn't have done this. We're not balanced. I need to get better. I'm a burden on this kid. Again, he is younger than me. Again, so cool. Very rewarding chapter to read. I almost want to suggest to everybody going forward, like, if you watch the anime, just go read this one chapter. Like, it's not going to spoil anything. Just read it so you get better into Eris's head. Expand that she's not just a tsundere brat character that just grows up a little bit, gets strong. No, she was struggling the whole time. And yes, technically it's something I always get with these character perspectives. It's the same story, but it's different perspective, which we'll get more into with the chapter later on, really getting into Lilia's perspective with Paul when they first met at the hall. It's the same story, different perspective to tell a different story. Moving on, we cut to Rudius, and he's obviously very happy that he has finally lost that virgin card. After 47 years, technically, he finally lost that card, and he is super happy about it. Going around talking to how big he is and talking down to anybody that still got the virgin card. But then when he goes to wake up Eris, he found that she was gone. He thinks, man, she's already gone. She's kind of skipping out of the coffee afterwards, the bedside talk and all that kind of stuff. And then he realizes his underwear is gone. He realizes his underwear gone. I don't know why the anime didn't mention that. Oh, that's so great. Yes, my mind immediately goes to the obvious. Eris took his underwear. It's like he took Roxy's underwear. Eris took his underwear. And so, yes, wherever Eris is right now, training to become stronger, she's got Rudius's underwear. Apparently Rudius and his desire for underwear is spreading. Anyways, he really quickly realized that Eris's underwear is sitting next to the bed, and so he puts on his pants and then he immediately sticks her underwear in his pocket. So now he has two underwear. He's collecting underwear. Just waiting for the day that he gets Sylphie's underwear. But yes, he realizes on the ground, scattered everywhere, is hair. Crimson hair. Yes, Eris's hair. And also he finds a note. He looks at the note, reads it. It says, the two of us aren't well balanced right now. I'm setting off. And that's it. He took a minute to digest this, and then suddenly he flew out the door. He went to Eris's room. She's gone. Luggage gone. Runs outside. Runs into Alphonse. Hey, Master Alphonse, where's Eris? She set out on a trip with Ghislaine. Where? That's when Alphonse regarded him with a cold, indifferent look in his eyes. I was told to keep that a secret from you. Oh, is that so? Rudy thought to himself, why? I don't get it. Huh? Did she break up with me? No, she abandoned me. She left me behind? Huh? Family? What? From this point on, Rudy has spent a whole week sitting around and being unable to do anything. He was dumbfounded. Alphonse would come by every now and then and nag him to get a job or something. Apparently, despite thinking the Fatoa region had nothing going for it, there was small villages developing and they were already beginning to cultivate wheat. So with this, Rudius followed Alphonse's instructions. He went and used earth magic to make a defensive wall around the camp. The river threatened to flood with its embankment eroded, so he created a levee. Apparently, with a vast number of people now coming back from Milshan, there was actually earnest efforts to rebuilding. At this point, Rudy starts to talk about Eris. Eris Boris Grey Rat was no more. She was simply known as Eris, which we'll find out later that technically within this world itself, if somebody does not have a family name, family names are typically kept to Austrian nobles, and noble families get family names. So yes, technically a commoner won't actually have a surname. So being simply Eris, she's now a commoner basically. At least that's the indication I'm getting based on them talking about the fact that later on they'll talk about Lilia and the fact that she was just known as Lilia because she was a commoner. But Alphonse said that her decision would cause several complications, so the official announcement of her fate would be postponed for several years. Rudius figured at this point that Alphonse is just working under orders from Darius. Not that he even cared. Even with Eris gone, Alphonse didn't seem different. Rudius joked about, man, Eris got away. But Alphonse just brushed it off, saying that he had to work towards the recovery of Fatoa. This is a guy that pretty much lost his tool, which kind of annoys me. I see that Alphonse is this person that's just bitter because he had this tool to fix everything, and now he's just got to work harder. Kind of, again, I understand Alphonse's perspective here, but dang it, this doesn't make you have a punchable face right now. Honestly, he figured that he should have asked more, but he felt apathetic with Eris gone. He didn't care about what the nobles were fighting over. He pondered about why Eris left. Was he bad at making love? Was she disillusioned by how it played out? Maybe her fondness for him ran out? The last 3 years was riddled with failures. They got home, but it was mostly reserved. Maybe she hated the idea of having to stick around with him for 2 more years just to fulfill her promise. He didn't know why she acted as if there were deeper meaning behind her actions. But that's when he came to the conclusion. In the end, he hadn't grown up at all. No wonder her feelings for him faded. It was then that he remembered a mission that he had. That's right. I need to search for Zenith. And that's how he set out for the northern part of the central continent. So yes, extremely different than the anime. Again, the anime was a lot more in his head with his perspective on being locked up once again. He became a NEET again, essentially. Which, yes, they kind of talk about here. He spent a whole week just kind of lounging around before Alphonse pushed him out. Said, go do something. So I do kind of see that they both kind of portrayed the same thing. I will honestly say the anime portrayed that being stuck in a place again aspect right. They were essentially, again, reliving his neathood. And he finally at some point realized, oh yeah, Zenith, I need to go. So I kind of chop it up as this whole segment is really kind of condensed down to him being stuck in his room again, being a NEET. And oh yeah, give a perspective of his old self. And then suddenly he remembers Zenith and he walks out the door. Which again isn't that bad. It's not terrible, but again, I chop it up again as it being that the adaptation was almost trying to condense a lot of this down and chop out a lot of politics around it. And yes, the politics about him, Eris herself kind of discarding everything and the whole aspects of Alphonse and everything. But it's kind of interesting to get that perspective of it starting off with Rudius being all excited. Man, I gave up my V card. I'm so good. Yeah, I'm awesome. I'm a band now, yeah. And then suddenly it ends with him going, no, I'm a failure. She gave up on me. She walked out. It's kind of to Eris's fault, the idea that she made such a very condensed note that he really literally just thinks that, oh yeah, we're not balanced. I'm leaving. Oh, so she hated me. She hated me this whole time. It's so scary how opposite this is. We just got done getting Eris's perspective and how much she just adored him and pretty much worshipped him. And then she had to leave because she worshipped him. And from Rudius's perspective is, I've been abandoned. She hates me. She got sick of me. She's always been sick of me. Eris's perspective, I don't want him to be sick of me. I don't want him to leave me. I don't want him to leave these two. These two. It does kind of cry out that whole aspect of talk. The two of you, please talk. But it's fine. I think it's really well portrayed. It doesn't make me angry. It doesn't make me think that way in a negative sense. So, but yes, that's technically it for Rudius in this entire volume. We are going to briefly jump into what Roxy's seen at the end of the first season, and again, that's much more expanded, and that's pretty much it for the first season. But yes, Interlude, the two she encountered. We cut to Roxy Magurdia, and she's just arrived at the town of Krashma. This is at the northwest end of the Demon Continent. It wasn't a robust town like Rikarsu, but it was thriving. It was ruled by a demon king, and this demon king had ties with the sea folk. The sea folk would supply to them seafood, while they supplied spices that were pretty much of the demon continent. This meant that the food here rivaled that which you can find at Windport. It essentially had the demon continent's most delicious food. They were at a bar, and Talhan screams out, "This food really goes great with some alcohol." Talhan was in good spirits upon arriving. It had the demon continent's alcohol and the sea folk's sweet alcohol. He was a dwarf, so he'd always have his fill. Enough to fill a bathtub. Since Roxy had the taste of a child despite her age, the food in the town didn't agree with her at all. She liked sweet things. The only saving grace was the sweet alcohol of the sea folk. It was shocking to Roxy that alcohol that she typically associated with bitterness was sweet.
"Now that's a rare sight. So, you're drinking too, eh, Roxy?"
"Yes, I am."
"You're in good mood today, eh? Barkeep, bring us a cask. I'll teach you how to drink like a dwarf."
Suddenly somebody yells out, "Let's have a competition. Barkeep, bring me a cask too." Apparently El Nase had already disappeared for the night. She walked off with some person that she had hit off with, obviously. This was normally the point that Roxy would start to feel a little bit alienated. But before she realized it, both her and the little girl sitting next to her were hooting at the boisterous Talhan. The girl yells, "Bah ha ha ha! What a fine dwarf you are! No matter how many times may change, the dwarf remains the same. You agree with me, don't you?" Roxy says, "Yes, naturally." "Oh, here we go! Go on, chug, chug, chug!" Talhan faced a gigantic demon with arms around his cask. He downed it before another one was brought. At this point, the drinks were already sold out, so the men started gathering up donations, all to go get drinks from another location. Roxy even threw in a green ore coin into the bag. "Impressive, miss. You must be rich." "Of course I am." Roxy was in a pleasant mood. She was already drunk. The little girl says, "Ha ha ha, I'm rich too. Here, take this, and let's make some more noise. We're all friends here today." The guy says, "Thank you kindly, princess. I'll be using this to make sure you guys drink until you're puking." She says, "Yeah, let's barf it up. This is great. Makes me remember the old days." The girl took a seat right next to Roxy and started eating Alanase's food that she left behind. Roxy didn't mind. She was drunk. The girl continued and started supplying Roxy with more drinks, and they kept drinking. Roxy was just doing what she was told. She just continued to drink. The girl says, "You're quite something, a real drinker. Quite amazing for someone so young as you." Roxy replied, "I don't want to hear that from you." Roxy was observing this girl. Leather hot pants, boot to the knees, leather tube top, pale skin, thighs and belly in full view. She had voluminous purple hair that waves and horns like a goat. No matter how you seen it, she was younger than Roxy. The girl says, "No need for flattery. I know how old I am." Roxy should have suspected that something was up. But again, she was drunk. Roxy replied, "I know my age well. Well, drink up." The girl said, "Oh, thank you. The alcohol here sure has gotten tastier in the last few hundred years. In the old days, the demon continent didn't have any sweet alcohol like this." Roxy says, "This is because of sea folk. The demon king here struck a deal with them." The girl says, "What's that?" "Bagura Hagura, you bastard. You hid this from me. I won't forgive you for that." Roxy says, "Let it go. We're all here as equals today, right?" "Equals." The girl says, "Oh, that's right. We're all equals here." It kind of gets a little details about the demon king Bagura Hagura. He was the ruler of this region, a burly, pig-faced demon. He was the most knowledgeable entity on the demon continent when it came to food and alcohol. Politically, he was moderate, but still, he participated in the front lines of the Laplace's war. When he was on the human lands, he stole food and liquor from houses after houses, earning the title of the Plundering King. At some point, Talhan had stripped the clothes from his chest and perched himself on the table, placing his elbow on a cask, and gave off an air of superiority.
"Who's next? Who's next?
I can't do it anymore.
Who's next? Anybody at all?"
The girl stood up. "All right, leave it to me."
"Was that, girl? You think you can win against me? Maybe you should try again in another 20 years.
Ha 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 ha. Foolish dwarf. I've already lived 300 years. A mere 20 would change nothing.
Ah, is that so? My bad then. Go ahead. Come at me.
But first, I would ask you to state your name. I will sure to remember you for being foolish enough to challenge me.
Talhan of Harsh, Large Mountain Summit.
All right then. The one to defeat you will be I, the Demon Emperor of Demon Eyes. Kishirika Kishirishu. Over time, funds were passed around, stocks were wiped out. At some point, Roxy was assigned to be the judge. She's sipping her drink, counting the two of theirs. "That's number 40. It was really a wonder where Kishirika was really putting it all. Yes, dwarf makes sense, but this little demon girl made no sense.
Brag.
At this point, alcohol rocketed out of Talhan's mouth and he fell over. Kishirika stood up proudly. I win! My name is Kishirika after all. The demon world's great emperor Kishirika Kishirishu. Now, say my name. Everybody began chanting her name. Who's the greatest in the world? They started chanting her name. A chorus rung out, announcing that Kishirika was the victor. People were yelling her name and people yelling to take it off. At this point, Roxy passed out as Kishirika was climbing on the counter, dancing naked. The next morning, Roxy opened her eyes. Ugh. Her head was pounding. Immediately, she used a spell tailored for hangovers. And then she also used a healing spell to heal her head. The pub looked like a brawl broke out. Ugh, I really did drink too much. She found Talhan half naked and looking dead. But honestly, she figured that would be exactly what he wished for. Amongst all the bodies of the drunk, Roxy spotted two people still standing. An angry barkeep and a disheartened Kishirika.
Compensation. I'm asking for compensation. I can't sell nothing with all the destruction you caused.
Yeah, but...
Then I have no choice but to sell you to the slave market.
What? You would sell me? Wait. I'll contact Hagura. Just hold on.
I'm not gonna hold. You're just saying that so you can run away.
At this point, Roxy honestly acknowledged that most of this stuff was drunk by Talhan. So she went over to Talhan's body, took his coin purse out, looked in there, had a decent amount in there. She went to the barkeeper and handed over some coin. He replied, this isn't enough. So she says, we bought up all of your booze before we started sending out for more. You have earnings from that, don't you?
Well, I guess.
Roxy let out another side, tossed the coin purse onto Talhan's body. Kishirika yells, oh, I'm sorry. Kishirika was trembling as she looked up at Roxy. Roxy remembered what the village chief said about the demon world's greatest emperor. She was different than what she had pictured. Though if she did have a long lifespan from her tribe, it made sense why she looked the way she did. She seemed to be on good terms with the demon king of the area too. And this was kind of funny because in the anime, even after she saves Kishirika, she doesn't believe Kishirika when she says, oh, well, thanks for saving me. I have the ability to bestow you an eye. Roxy kind of goes, yeah, whatever. And then she walks around the corner. And it wasn't until she says that she's, looking for Rudius's family and she starts to use her ability. Suddenly Roxy goes, wait, you can do that? Again, the anime kind of makes it out like she didn't know that this was a real Kishirika. But as we see with the light novel, there's a point in which, because she made the decision that she did, it was a very selfless decision. So you kind of miss that selflessness of Roxy because, again, the anime kind of portrays it as she just, on a whim, says, oh, well, I'll look for Rudius's family, I guess. She made a sacrifice. She could have got an eye. and the light novel almost puts it in perspective of she could have got something really valuable, a demon eye. But Roxy chose, without hesitation, to find Rudius's family. Anyhow, Kishirika asks Roxy what her name was, and she's like, oh, pardon for the later introductions. I'm Roxy, of the Bagoya region's Migard tribe. Kishirika brightens up. Oh, Roxy. Oh, I know you. You're Rudius's master. You know Rudius? I happened to run into him in Windport. That boy was quite entertaining. You don't say. She was honestly worried about what Rudius told this girl about herself. And you've shown yourself to be a great teacher. You helped me as well. So let's see, why don't I give you a reward? Again, here it is. Roxy's heart leapt at the word reward. She was known for bestowing demon eyes on people. Your greatness, are you able to look for missing people with your demon eyes? Yes, I can. There's not a single person in the world I can't find. All right, then I'd like you to look for Rudius and his family. They're currently missing. Roxy asked without hesitation, even if it was a shame to miss out on the demon eye. But Kishirika's eyes can find anything and anyone. Oh, how admirable of you, to use your one and only wish for the sake of another. If the world was in such a position that I was able to do so, I'd bestow upon you the position of Demon King. No, I don't need that. Oh, I see. Too humble for that. Well then. Kishirika's eyes rotated, changed colors. She craned her neck this way and that way, humming to herself, and then she nodded. Rudius is in the northern part of the central continent. He's wearing light clothes and is running. Training, perhaps? Roxy bobbed her head. He must have seen the message and is searching for the northern part of the central continent. He could have gone to Begarit, but must have wanted to see his home first. Again, Roxy didn't know that Rudius was taking Eris home, and yes, technically also that he eventually went to go meet Lilia and Aisha, so Kishirika continues. His father is in Milshan, along with a maid. The maid is apparently named Lilia, and they're living in the same building, with their $2. Roxy was relieved that they were saved, assuming Rudius had found them on the Demon Continent. Again, he doesn't know this whole back and forth. She just kind of assumes that he ran into her and brought him there, and then went straight up there to go see his home. His mother is... Hold a moment. Kishirika hummed, and then squinted her eye. She's in the Begaret continent. In the maze city of Rapan, it seems. Roxy's face lit up. At least she knew that they were all still alive. As expected of the Grey Rat family, their luck was strong. However, something is a bit odd. Kishirika's face scrunched and her eyes slowly turned. Is there some kind of problem? No, I can't quite see it. Even with your eye, your greatness? I'm not quite my full strength yet. Well, you'll understand when you see for yourself. That's troubling. Is something wrong? I need to know the details. Well, complain if you like, but I can't see what I can't see. Oh, that's right. This may become a surprise, but she may be in the middle of a labyrinth. It's a labyrinth city, and I've never been there myself, so I can't say for sure. You can't see inside a labyrinth? No, Begaret's labyrinth is overflowing with high concentration of mana. At this point, Roxy fell into thought. Zenith used to go dungeon diving with Paul. Roxy had an understanding of their strength based on traveling with Talhan and Alanase. However, why hadn't she contacted them yet? 3 years had passed since the displacement incident. At any rate, she's alive, yes? Indeed. There's no doubt about that. Roxy decided to believe those words. Whatever the reason, they would just have to delve into the labyrinth. I understand then. Thank you. Think nothing of it. It's a show of my gratitude for you helping me out. Again, I think this was kind of one of those troubling... This is easily the biggest oof of the first season. The first season, that was the cliffhanger. The fact that everybody seemed like they were in a good spot. Paul reunited with Zenith and Lilia. We had, Geese is over here just traveling and Begaret. We have, everybody's kind of happy. Everybody's in a safe location. Rudius is back at the refugee camp, decides to walk off, but he's not in danger. Eris is going to train with Ghislaine. Everybody's good, except for Zenith. She's in a labyrinth. And that's the fear that comes from this. It seems like Roxy right here is kind of assuming, well, why is Zenith going down in a town labyrinth? Like, she's over here, and then she just goes down in a labyrinth. And is she alone? Why is she... If she was transported to Begaret, to this maze town, why wouldn't she send out word that she's there? I mean, yes, technically, Rudius was joking about the fact that she got sick of Paul and ran off, but it gives a sense, if you think about it, that Zenith has been down in there for 3 years. Yes, unless she just randomly decided, I'm here, I'm just gonna go down this labyrinth real quick and just chill down there. It's insinuating that she has been stuck down there for 3 years. What the circumstances are gonna be, I don't know, but again, this is kind of semi-spoilers because it kind of depicts something that you can draw conclusions from the brief shot that we got in the anime. Almost looks like she's kind of trapped beneath something, like a dragon or something. So, anyhow, I don't want answers. Shush. Chat shush. Commenters shush. Just speculation at this point. Beyond this point, we are going to go full on not covered by anime. And I don't know if they ever will, but this is all not adapted. And it's kind of skipped. They kind of briefly show Roxy parting ways with Alan Alsay and them. So I don't think any of this will be adapted unless they decide for some reason to jump back to it. But yes, that afternoon, Talhan awoke and resumed as normal drinking like nothing happened. Ellen Alsay had returned back with a bunch of hickeys peppered all around her neck. Roxy gathered the 2 of them for a meeting. It was good fortune that I ran into the great emperor of the demon world. Ellen Alsay, hearing this, started laughing. Talhan says, leaving that aside, that means our journey's over, right? Technically, this was true. Their mission was over. Their whole mission here was to confirm their family being alive and locate them. And technically, Roxy has all that information now. Roxy at this point says, I'm going to return to Milshin and talk to Paul about what I found. Ellen Alsay replies, then we'll part ways with you somewhere before then. They were obviously not wanting to see Paul. They really don't want to see Paul. At this point, they all kind of realize that, yes, Roxy's going to end up going to Paul. The 2 of them will travel to the Begaret continent, but Rudius is going to be up searching the north for no reason. So Ellen Alsay suggested they need to get word to Rudius somehow, to let him know. That's when 2 individuals stormed in out of nowhere. And that's where I come in. Dun dun dun.
And me. Dun dun dun.
Suddenly 2 interlopers appeared out of nowhere. I listened to your conversation.
By eavesdropping.
First was a well-built man. Demon with obsidian skin and 6 arms. The 2 at the top were folded. The middle ones were shooting finger guns at Roxy. Why didn't they adapt this? And the bottom ones were resting at his waist. His purple hair flowed down to his waist. Perched on his shoulder, reclining, was the demon world's greatest emperor. Kishirika says, here we go. I am Kishirika Kishiriku. People call me the great emperor of the demon world. The obsidian skinned man says,
and I'm her fiancé, the demon king Badigadi.
Badigadi?
Badigadi.
I hate that name. I get the letters off. Elanase speaks up. I think we saw each other this morning, sir.
Ha 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 ha. I had an amazing time with you, miss.
So stupid. Of course. Of course. Of course. Badigadi clenched one of his fists and inserted his thumb between his index finger and middle finger as he responded. Roxy says, do you know each other? Elanase says, basically, I guess we do. Roxy says, but just now you said fiance. What? I suppose we should introduce ourselves first? Flustered, Roxy's eyes darted back and forth, but she finally just settled to just bowing her head. Kishirika says, Roxy, raise your head. Since Badi is so popular, this is a near daily occurrence. Badi says,
more like it's...
Can't do with his voice.
More like it's physically impossible
for me to put in Kishirika.
More like it's physically impossible for me to put it in Kishirika yet. So I have no other choice.
The words, I just told Rudius to clear up his language. Now I'm saying this with Batty, so I have to call it Batty later. The words were spoken in such a carefree manner that Roxy's brain struggled to digest their meaning. However, they put the matter aside. Roxy knew the Demon King Badigadi. I keep saying Badigadi. Roxy knew the Demon King Badigadi. I'm just gonna go call him Batty from now on. Known as the immortal Demon King Badigadi. Younger brother of the immortal Demon King Atofe, or Atof, I'm guessing. Atof was aligned with the moderates during the war and fought against the demon god Laplace at Kishirika's castle, where he was defeated. His current whereabouts were unknown, but he was a venerated figure. Kishirika speaks up. Roxy, I owe a debt to Rudius. If he has lost his way, then I will lend him my strength. Batty says,
although she'll be borrowing my strength to do it.
Take note of that, by the way. I didn't realize this. Take note of this, by the way. Talhan at this point inquired if they were sure about this. Apparently, Badi was curious about this Rudius that Kishirika keeps praising. I'm wondering at this point, what the hell? Like, yes, Rudius fed her. I guess she felt like she was literally going to starve to death at that point. So him giving her food was basically him saving her life. But still, she gave him an eye, so she returned the favor. So it almost feels like they're trying to imply something else here. What I think is really going on here is that, again, when Kishirika looked at Rudius with one of her eyes, she started getting like, oh, that's disgusting. I think she's seen inside of him. I think she's seen his inner self. And so she's very fascinated by him. And I think that she's been talking to Batty about him. Anyhow, Kishirika speaks up. What's this? Are you jealous, darling?
Why, of course I am, honey.
Tisks, you're still such a child. I love you and only you.
I'm not gonna let that make me complacent. I'll crush any rival who appears.
Roxy was obviously not okay with this, but it's not like they would listen to her. At this point, Batty and Kishirika just continue to cackle together. At this point, we get a little bit insight into the sea folk and why they're essentially going to be able to help them. Following the discord with the Laplace War coming to an end, the sea folk obviously controlled passage of the sea. With the Demon King Bagura Hagura being friends with the king of the sea folk, and Bagura being an old acquaintance of Batty, this meant that they could bypass the Divine Continent and head straight to the Central Continent. Kind of nice. That helps. Because that was a kind of a fear that Rudius had, saying that they could possibly go through the Divine Continent, but they would have to basically take a ship there and then crawl around it, and it was dangerous. They could literally, being able to have that ability to bypass it, and the sea folk allowing them, they could just take a ship straight across. But yes, Roxy still had to report to Paul, but she couldn't go alone. She wasn't skilled enough to travel that entire distance back down south by herself. Yes, she still had to sleep. So she asked one of the two of them to come with her, and of course Talhan and Elanase just kept bickering back and forth until Talhan finally conceded. Honestly, Roxy didn't understand why Talhan and Elanase couldn't just go together and just report via letter, but whatever. This meant that Roxy's party had to split in two. Roxy and Talhan would head down to Milshan. Elanase would travel with the Great Emperor and the Demon King to the northern part of the Central Continent. As Roxy parted ways with Elanase, they exchanged some gratitudes. Elanase at this point offered her advice to lock in any guy that she comes across with her lips. You're bringing that up again? Elanase replies, none of that, just listen to me. If there's someone you really like, go hard on them. Love is something that can grow afterwards.
Talhan replies, you said the same thing to Zenith, didn't you?
I did. That's how she got Paul. My teaching is flawless. This is so bad. Roxy honestly thought that Paul and Zenith were the ideal husband and wife. So she ended up actually taking Elenalce's advice very seriously. Very well, Miss Elenalce, if I find such a person, I will go hard for them. Of course, I'll be sure to tell Rudius how miserable you were at night, wrestling in your bed sheets as you went at it alone. Wait, why did you know about that? And please don't say that. I wasn't thinking about Rudy when I did it. Of course. Roxy's still playing her one-handed bands. One-handed bands. Shut up, Andrew. Roxy realizing that Rudius might be 15 by the time that Elenalce will find him, a thought had occurred to her that Elenalce might actually fancy him. Elenalce asks, "You went quiet all of a sudden. What's wrong?" "No, it's just, if Rudius has become a fine man, would you go for him?" Roxy tried to sound as casual as she could when asking it, and when she did, Elenalce breathed a sigh of disgust. Ha! I don't have the faintest desire of becoming Paul's daughter-in-law. She generally looked disgusted. Feeling assured, Roxy said, "Oh, right, then, well, we'd best be on our way." I kind of questioned that at some point. I really did. I think it's still gonna stick with me. If they're eventually gonna meet. I mean, it's not like when she's sleeping around with all these dudes everywhere. It's not like she wants to be any of theirs, but whatever. With this, Roxy and Elenalce bid farewell to each other. Elenalce then went to Talhan. She glared down at the stubbly little dwarf. "Talhan, please go die in a ditch somewhere." Talhan spit on the ground and looked up, equally displeased.
In return, those words right back at you.
Roxy kind of thought about how the fact these two are really close. They parted ways. Later on, we find out that Elenalce had boarded her ship. It was a sea folk ship back in the ancient times. It was pulled along by sea creatures, making the human-made ships look shabby in comparison. But human ships were actually faster and safer. As Elenalce was boarding with Batty right behind her, she realized Kishirika wasn't with them. Apparently, she wasn't coming. Elenalce inquired why not, which Batty basically told her. Kishirika can't leave the Demon Continent. She asked if it was a curse, and he basically said something like that. Realizing this, she kind of wished that Kishirika went with Roxy and Talhan. Then again, she thought about what it would be like for somebody like Roxy to have someone like Kishirika following around, and changed her mind. That's it. That is the chapter. So crazy. So much more in here than, again, the anime had, and I loved every single minute of it. Really getting a fun little picture of Roxy, Talhan, and Elenalce just in their shenanigans. Now, honestly, I'm not a big, huge fan of drinking humor and whatnot, but still, there's something more personal about this whole situation. Seeing that Talhan's just acting all high and mighty on top of this table, and Kishirika being all goofy and jumping in there, and yes, drinking him to death. But it's the aftermath of it, of Roxy having to kind of fix the situation like she typically does, giving off a sigh, and then just handing over a bunch of money, which she seemed to have plenty, but still. But yes, the nugget. The few nuggets in here is, like I mentioned earlier, I love the aspect of Roxy knowing that Kishirika was who she was. She didn't just kind of assume, and she didn't just kind of brush her off like, yeah, whatever, you're the demon emperor, whatever. Sure, I'm looking for Rudius. Oh, wait, you can find him? Oh, crap. Yeah, where's he at? No, she knew, and instead of asking for Demon Eye, which should be very, very valuable, she said no. Look for Rudius' family. That's what I'm looking for. And again, like I mentioned earlier, the fact that Kishirika has a massive amount of fascination of Rudius himself and wants to help him out. He saved, again, yes, there's a part of he saved my life by feeding me when I was starving, but again, I think there's something else there. I think she's seen something in Rudius, and that's why she couldn't stop talking about him to Batty. But no, I would have loved to see Batty that whole scene with them coming in would have been so amazing animated. Again, the folded arms, him shooting finger guns at Roxy, and her just standing there dumbfounded at the fact that, yes, Elenalce just slept with this dude. Can't put it in her set yet, so I have to do it. The two of them, Badigadi and Kishirika, are something special. I think in the anime, when Kishirika showed up, I honestly felt like she was so cartoonish. Like her first appearance when she's walking all alone and screaming, "Ah, ha, 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 come with me, everybody." She looked like a cartoon character. And it kind of broke the feel of the show. Like the show has always been kind of, yes, fantasy, whatever, but real. And then she looked cartoonish. She looked like a Looney Tunes character came out of nowhere. It's like you're watching a noir film and then suddenly out of nowhere, Bugs Bunny pops up, which yes, technically was a movie. But no, I just so into these characters. And yes, knowing that unlike the anime, that Alanalase and Badi are heading to them. Like they're literally going to split straight across the top of the map and go straight to where Rudius is at, which implies that wherever Reese is heading to, there's a chance that this goofy baddie guy is going to show up out of nowhere. And yes, a very thirsty Ellen Alce, who, even though she claims that she wouldn't want to be anywhere associated with Paul, yeah, she's going to go after that thing. She's going to go after that thing, which will be very, very interesting. But no, it does kind of suck because you kind of think that, what is the system of communication on the Demon Continent? It's sort of implying that there is no way to get a letter from where they're at, the northwestern point of the Demon Continent, all the way down to Milshin. You would think that at least the Adventure Guild would be able to send message through each of these Adventure Guilds to Milshin, but I guess the assumption here is that unless you get it to at least Windport, or the main port down there, there's no way that a message will get through the Demon Continent. It's like there's not message carriers running around, but you'd assume that they would have some sort of communication. Otherwise, how would each area know that you have raised your rank? There has to be a communication happening. Maybe just not letters to random people. Because the hope there would be that Roxy would just be able to write a letter and it would go to them, and then she can go straight with them to Rudius. Yeah. I would have loved to have seen Ellen Alce saying, go die in a ditch to Telheim in the anime too. Again, they got to just kind of a brief little showing that Roxy was going to part ways with them. There was really no explanation there whatsoever in the anime, other than the fact that she was going to go talk to Paul. But yes, as usual, love a lot of this world building in this area as well, getting the sense of the Demon Kings of this area, the Sea Folk, the agreement they have there, which is kind of an interesting thing to kind of add to this whole situation. It kind of makes you wonder if Rudius had talked to Kishirika, there's a possibility that she could have talked to Badi and had them have a quick trip straight to where he needed to go. It's kind of unfortunate, but again, it's a good thing because he got to run to Paul and learn about everything else. And yes, he wouldn't have gone by the Shrone Kingdom to save Lilia if he just gone straight across. So it makes sense that he had to make this journey. But no, I did really love Ellen Alce's parting words. I'm starting to like Ellen Alce. Like, I didn't like her at first, but yeah, like this whole exchange here, and especially with her comments to Roxy, was, yes, not so pure, but at the same time, I think it's something that Roxy needed to hear. Like, yeah, if you run into Rudius again, yes, it's who we're talking about here, get at him. Don't let him go. It's kind of interesting. It is kind of I don't necessarily agree with it. Like, it's the idea of jump in bed, love later. But still, she is giving Roxy the boost that she needs to go, look, if you see Rudius again, get at him. Don't hesitate. And I kind of respect that. Of course, again, I'm technically Team Roxy here, so it makes sense to me. But no, any chapter that has Roxy in it, I'm on board. I love it. It was great. 10 out of 10. More Roxy is better. Even though it's Roxy getting drunk, she's still cute. I'll let my usual dislike of the drunken girl pass when it comes to Roxy. And again, I would have loved to have seen that adapted. Why couldn't they have adapted that? Her sitting in the middle of the two of them going at the drinking, and she's just sitting there sipping and counting it. Anyhow, unfortunately, I'm going to stop here. My memory card is dying right now because it's so full. This is already going to probably turn out to be an extremely long video. And the last chapter, which is following Aisha and Lilia, I'm going to be talking a lot about that chapter. So I might just record that separate and release that later. But yeah, I need to stop now. Otherwise, I'm literally going to kill my computer. So with that said, I thank you guys for joining me. It's unfortunate that I couldn't finish off this novel. Just know that I'm done with Volume 6, and I'll be beginning Volume 7 here soon. So exciting stuff going forward. I've already mentioned before, if you are going to be dropping off because you don't want to watch these videos beyond the anime, it's very unfortunate. I would welcome you guys to please go read it yourself so you can join us all, but do what you have to do. But yes, as per usual, I really, really appreciate your guys' support. All those that support us on Patreon, our tips link, our super thanks, memberships, all those that join in the premieres, all those that leave comments, all that hit the likes, all that are subscribed. I greatly appreciate everybody's support. And yes, for those that are departing because they don't want to read on, I greatly appreciate you joining us this far. Don't unsubscribe to the channel. I will be making very sure that anything going forward beyond this next chapter, that I keep spoilers out of the thumbnails and the titles. It's gonna be difficult, but I'm gonna do my best And yes, now that I have caught up with the anime, I can finally make the video that I've been super excited to make for a long time now, which is pretty much my top 5, 10, however many it's going to be, most insane things that were skipped in the anime adaptation. This is going to include things like how the Superb's tails are their spears. Yes, skipping Therese at the checkpoint. Stuff like that. Stuff that I think are really, really cool. Things that are really insane that just boggle my mind they skipped or glossed over. But anyhow, like I said, thanks to everybody for the support. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. And until the next Mushoku Mondays, y'all take care. Apparently, despite him thinking that Fatoa region had nothing left for it,